Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. I hope this will be a nice little respite from your work week, and I hope your week was tolerable and maybe even great. But in any case, let's just take some time out and take a look back at some very, very strange characters in history. And to help us do that, we guess who's back? Our wonderful historian, James Martin.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're keeping well.
We're going to be talking about strange people, present company accepted, of course.
Oh, no, I'm definitely very strange.
Well, I know some of your relatives are, because one of them we're going to talk about, or at least, I don't know, I guess it was strange, but it's also very interesting. You know, we've talked about it a lot in the past, and I don't know what order we're going to go in today on the different characters, but, you know, we've looked a lot into our backgrounds, and especially you've looked more into my background, I think, than I have. And we've discovered some pretty prominent people in some cases. But for all of those, my favorite ancestor is still this one strange man. And we're going to talk a little bit about him. He was quite a well-known guy, but he wasn't a king or a queen. And but he certainly had a strange history. But I'll ask you, Jay. Well, actually, you're related to him as well. You and I are both related to this character, and I think you said he's my 11th grandfather, and he's your 13th uncle. So somehow that's another crossover to where you and I are related. I know we've found another couple points in different areas, but we keep crossing back over. And what I wanted to ask you, Jay, since you have been doing so much of that, looking into people's genealogies and stuff, I was thinking about it earlier, and you know, I would have never assumed that, you know, I was related to anyone in particular in the past. I just had no clue. And I certainly never really thought about, you know, I'm probably related to kings and queens and things like that. How common is it when you're doing someone's genealogy in their family tree, does it include some well-known, does it always happen? Does it mostly happen? Does it, you know, I'd just be curious about that.
I mean, well, first, everyone, just to say thanks for having me on. And
I'm so happy you're back.
Recovering from COVID. So if you find me coughing and spluttering still, it's been over a month. You know, that's the reason why.
Well, and also you've been traveling as well as you do. So I don't know if there's any updates on that. We could talk about it at the end of the show, but
yeah, lots of travel and exciting stuff coming up. I mean, to answer your question, I thought with my family background that the answer would be everyone is connected to, you know, a someone from history. But a number of people have asked me to do a very basic family tree, sort of getting up to the Elizabethan period. And I know we've discussed before why the Elizabethan period. Well, it's just where there's this explosion of the print press, meaning that ordinary people begin appearing on documents, and it becomes easier to to document the life and times, marriages, children of people. This said, it's not that common. If we were to say that people like Charlemagne, I think Attila the Hun, King John, Henry the First, that kind of, people who had lots of children, there is, of course, going to be a lot of connections to those people. Where we're looking in, let's say, the late medieval Tudor Stuart period, and by that I mean 17th century for the Stuarts, the sort of 1600s. That's becoming rarer and rarer. I mean, commenting just before the show that, that it's my 11th great granddad. That really isn't that far back, and it's not.
Yeah. I mean, because I think my cousin John, did our family tree back to I think at least my 53rd grandparent. Now, I don't know, how accurate he was able to be, although I do know that he had professional assistance in doing the family tree, professional genealogist. But so, yeah, when you said 11th, I thought, I don't know why, but in my head, it was something like 30 back. But 11 just seems so recent compared to some of the other figures that we deal with.
Well, it is. And, I know when we've spoke about genealogy before, one of the things I keep on saying to people is, listen out for family rumors, things like that. But one of the projects I've been involved in my sort of day-to-day job over the past couple of years has been an oral history. That is to say, not things that are written down, things that have just been passed on by word of mouth from people's, mums, dads, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc. That actually extends back. I mean, the oldest, this is just someone who met someone and was told about this, actually extended to the American Civil War. Now, if you think about that, that's really not that long ago.
No.
Where you got grandparents who are born, my grandmother, no longer with us, but she was born in 1908.
Right.
And if you then consider, in her lifetime, for example, I mean, she passed away at the age of 105, 106. There were 2 world wars. When she was born, the primary method of travel was by train or by horse and cart or by boat, clipper ship, steamer ship, etc., to when she passed away, which was flight was the norm if you wanted to travel internationally. We still have trends, the rapid change recently, but actually it's a really large period of time. So, yeah, it's not that it's not that common where you find people of note in relatively recent history. And as I say, for the person that you're speaking to, I would just note for anyone listening, it's a great uncle of mine, in other words, not direct. However, for Renee, full credit, absolutely direct. That's full great grandparent for you. So there we go.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, he's an interesting. Now, should we carry on with Grandpa John, or should we go ahead and talk about some of the other figures and come back to John?
Well, we might as well talk about John. I mean, there's a few other figures. I mean, I think the idea for the show was there are so many ordinary people who became extraordinary for very intriguing reasons. These are people like me and you. Again, usual caveats. We can't look through our glasses of today. We have to try and see what was going on from their perspective. So I think if we are going to talk about Grandpa John, it sounds like a pizza chain. But yeah, if we want to talk about him, the person that we're referring to, and for me, some of the really interesting people in history, for lots of different reasons, hail from Scotland. And I would just preface this that the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, in March of 2022, issued a formal apology on behalf of the Scottish government to those convicted of witchcraft in Scottish history. So thousands of people, apologies for what the government did. And I suppose maybe that Grandpa
included in that apology.
I would need to check whether she listed them individually. She'd be there for quite a while.
Yeah.
But, Grandpa John is an interesting guy. He's born in 1596. His name is John Colquhoun, which is spelt with, there's a few Q's in there, but we don't pronounce them, so it's Colquhoun. I can hear Scottish people in my head saying, I've butchered the pronunciation of that anyway. But
which sort of became, among other derivatives, Calhoun. The people in the United States that were from that lineage became Calhoun.
Yeah, and there's no standard spelling. We're not talking about, there's mass access to dictionaries, so people often spell to surname how it might sound phonetically.
I mean, I even was reading about that name, and there were names like Kilpatrick that were
follower of Patrick, yeah.
Yeah.
Or son of,
interesting. I mean, Calhoun is kind of obvious how they just kind of shortened it, took the Q's out, and made it easier to read, I guess. But I was surprised that there's a plethora of names that were derived from that original Colquhoun name, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, well, he's born, as I say, the end of the 1500s. Where Scotland and England are very separate countries. And Scotland is really beginning to sort of expand that kind of idea. And he becomes, he's the head of a clan. And by clan, we sort of mean really family, children of a particular lineage. And he becomes a clan chief. He's the 19th Lord of Luss. He's a baron. And the thing that alerted me to him was he dies in 1647, nowhere near Scotland. And I remember when we were going through, I think we're just having a little trip down your family tree, do you want to go mother, father, all the rest of it, all the way back. And when I had a look, this guy is born in Scotland, in Strathclyde, and dies in Italy. And the key question is why? Holidaying is not really as we would have it. It's not unusual for people to travel to Italy. Maybe on some pilgrimage to Rome, things like that. It's not too unusual to see that. But at the time, Rome isn't really welcoming to people in the British Isles because there's been a little thing called the Protestant Reformation and perhaps wouldn't be welcome. So what was he doing in Italy? And there we find that he wasn't in Rome. In fact, he passes away in Turin. Which is famous for a particular shroud. But that's where the mystery of this person, what a great story for a film or something like this, but this is where we read a tale of romance and then necromancy, which you think, okay, I don't like where that's going. But essentially, he marries someone called Lilias Graham. Now, she was a lady. She was the eldest daughter of someone called John Graham, who was the 4th Earl of Montrose. Unfortunately for her, I suppose, he met her sister, as you would, and fell.
Younger sister.
The younger sister, and he falls madly in love with her. And of course, how do we explain any of this? Well, today we would say, maybe natural connection or something like that. But that wasn't the case back then. What we know about John Colquhoun is he had I don't want to say servant, perhaps that sounds like there was some sort of elective position and what have you, but perhaps something like butler might be closer to it. But he was his butler was from Germany, and this United Nations style event that's going on in Scotland is also really interesting. Now, why Germany? Well, Germany's not a country at this point, but there's Protestantism around, so perhaps that's the connection. Ends up in Scotland, because of his religion. And his name is someone called Thomas Carl Lippis. Now, it's probably not his actual name, but that's as close as we can get. Now, he's accused, firstly, of witchcraft. He's put a spell on our new Lord, our John Colquhoun. That's the only explanation. And so there's various investigations into witchcraft with him. But slight issue with John. As these investigations begin, that's where there begins this allegation that John himself has been practicing witchcraft and sorcery, summoning
necromancy,
dark arts. Well, yes, there was all sorts of accusations: witchcraft, necromancy, sorcery, that kind of stuff. And what's really interesting about John is he can see which way the wind's blowing and basically does a runner. In other words, he gets out of the country very quickly. Now, you can imagine that the Graham family, these Lords of Montrose, are pretty angry with the fact that John has cast some sort of spell over their younger daughter. And despite the fact that John's married to her older sister, elopes with the younger daughter, fleeing the country. Now, the accusation that was made against him was incest. So this incestuous relationship. Now, under Scottish law at the time, if you married, your sister's younger sister, because it's part of the family, this is incest.
Your wife's younger sister.
Your wife, sorry, yes. Otherwise, that would be incest.
All the way around.
A whole different thing. Yeah, if you're married to your wife's sister, then you would be charged.
Married or even had relations with the sister of or brother of your wife would be considered incestuous.
Now, the younger sister is kind of absolved from all of this. She's under a spell, you see.
Yeah. Wow.
So hypnotized with all sorts of potions and all of this. And, there's various explanations that she wouldn't have run off with this character if she hadn't been, quote, enchanted. Now, malfeasance is the word that they were using, sort of bad speech in all of this. It was sorcery, it was all of this. Then the story gets legs, and it was not just potions now, but little charms that were perhaps put under a bed by this German, footman, servant, whatever you want to call him, and all of the rest of it. And what I thought I would do is just give you a little bit of an idea of some of the language that was used at the time. Now, I do know that you found this funny when I've done this before.
I did, yeah.
So I will do my best.
Shall we have a look at who we're talking about real quickly? And then gorgeous head of hair. Gorgeous. anyway, that's him. He does look a little suspicious.
It looks like he's a bit necromancy. Now, I'm not sure where that allegation is. It just seems to be one of these things that they were throwing out.
He looks a lot, he reminds me a lot of my dad, especially the hair when, and that looked a lot like my hair in my younger days before my hair just magically turned red.
Well, what we know about 17th century hairstyles like that is almost certainly it was a wig. So that's been really revealing, Renee.
I'm sorry to hear that. I thought that's where I got my thick head of hair.
It probably was. They tended to use wigs of a similar style to their hair, but it was much more efficient for them to shave their head to avoid lice and use a wig that could be taken away and washed.
Lice, those pesky lice, always a problem.
Always a problem. Always a problem. But yes, this is from a book. So this is 1631. And it is a tale of magic on Loch Lomond. This is the idea. And like I say, I'm not reading the full effect. So if you do want to read a little bit more, then John Colquhoun, if you were to type in something like sorcery or necromancy or something like this, you can read a little bit more into his very interesting and colourful life. But here we go. But the magician and his vile arbiter, along with his miserable victim, had betaken themselves to where the power of the Lord Justice General and the Lord Advocate of Scotland did not extend, and had fled far beyond the bounds of their jurisdiction. These criminal letters were, however, duly executed by a king's messenger in all form and with great solemnity. According to the usage of the law of Scotland, the king's messenger made an open proclamation at the market cross of Edinburgh, and Pearnshaw of Leith, and said, I dutifully, lawfully, and orderly denounce Sir John Colquhoun of Luss and Thomas Carl Lippis, his servant, his majesty's rebels, and put them to his highness horn with 3 several blasts of a horn, as use is, and ordain all their movable goods and gear to be inbrought for his majesty's use, for their contempt and disobedience. Now, I'll just translate some of that. The first bit is to do with because he'd set sail to Italy or to Europe, he was outside of the jurisdiction of the king's guards, and law. So there was nothing they could do. So they've basically seized his assets, in essence. And as I say, the time period that we're dealing with here, 1631, you have Charles I, and he's the son of James I of England, James VI of Scotland. So we have one monarch on 2 countries. The countries are not unified. There's different legal systems, very much different countries, Scotland and England. But Charles I is reigning for a brief period because he loses his head shortly after. But he is the one who is reigning. It continues. The libel which accuses Sir John Colquhoun and his servant of magic, in order to enable the former to accomplish his diabolical purpose, expressly exculpates Lady Catherine from being a willing participant in this crime. For if she had been otherwise than a passive victim, she too, as guilty of incest, would have been liable to capital punishment. But the magical arts of the seducer screened the seduced from actual blame. The Lord Advocate expressly declares that the virtue which had previously resisted Sir John's unaided attempts to subdue it by his subtle and enticing speeches, only succumbed to the force of enchantment in the shape of an intoxicated or charmed jewel set with diamonds and rubies. I cannot but regret, as well for the sake of the due punishment of crime, as for the purpose of eliciting evidence regarding the practice of sorcery in Scotland during these centuries, that Sir John Colquhoun and his accomplice did not stand their trial. The fact that a man of his wealth and rank and influence should have preferred exile and disgrace, obscurity, to a bold confronting of the charge induces me to believe that some startling and damning facts would have been extracted from this wild story, from the intoxicated diamonds, rubies that were prepared for the baronet by his confederate Carlippus.
Oh my goodness. That is so funny. And it is very over the top, and it makes me wonder whether there's any truth to any of it, whether he really was even having anything to do with witchcraft. I mean, I hope he was, because it's more interesting that way. But I kind of sadly have a feeling that this was all trumped up, and that the real problem was that he ran off with his.
Yeah, I do think that there's this notion that from when you read in so he was tried in absentia. Like I say, he's found actually in Vienna from memory, before moving. So at the court of Vienna, Austria. Before moving to Turin, where he eventually is at the court there. So he's.
That's what I was going to ask you about. What became of him in Italy, and how was if all his assets were seized? I don't know if he got away with some, with a cache of jewels or something that were worth a lot of money before he left, but he certainly. Left everything behind from what I can see. And so how was it that he was able to get in with these other courts?
Well, he might have had contacts there. That isn't particularly clear. What is, I suppose, if we were to look at other periods in history, for example, when Napoleon and prior to them, in the French Revolution, you have deposed, assetless counts from France fleeing to Britain, for example, and other countries. What happens then? Well, you end up with some very useful benefactors in the person. In other words, so we take revolutionary France. The idea in Britain was, well, we can use these people to not only give us some intelligence, but we can use them to foment rebellion and re-establish the monarchy. I can only assume, just an educated guess with him, that he had contacts in a world that was, just in the time period that he's around. You've got the wars of religion still raging in France. You have Catholic versus Protestant, and if he's fled, perhaps he would be sympathetic if people put him up. We do know he's found in the courts, and I don't mean that in a judicial way,
right?
But in he's hosted by the local rulers as a courtier. And with that, it's usually the case that he may have been given some stipend, something like this, to continue. I should explain also that there is a rank system. You whilst peasants aren't around in this period, they effectively are in different names. You still have to look up to people of a higher station. So if you're a baron, a lord, a duke, an earl, there are all these ranks, and it doesn't really matter where you go in Europe. You are of an elevated station. You see, the idea is if you are a baron and suddenly
it's all about your bloodline, really.
Yeah, well, if you're a baron or an earl and you've been deposed and you end up in another country, well, you can't become a peasant, because then, well, all of you could become peasants. So there's that idea. My direct ancestor, my fourth great granddad, rose up against the crown quite late on and ended up in Cumbria. He was the chief of Clan Macmillan, which is related to the Sinclairs. So, for example, the likes of, I think Niven Sinclair is, quite a recent cousin of mine, just as an example there.
That's a bizarre coincidence, too, because, of your connection to Niven through Tim.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And before you had any idea of the Sinclair connection, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Now, he was, I should just say, King Charles, as the monarchs of Britain still are head of the Anglican Church, and there is a church in Scotland, but what we do know about John Colquhoun is that he was excommunicated from the Protestant Church. So it might be, I don't know this, I haven't read this, but he could have converted to Catholicism, and maybe that was the price for him being put up in these other places. Who knows ultimately, but very interesting character.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should go on to another one, since we've spent a lot of time on Dear John. But I know you had a couple of other people you wanted to bring up, and there's so many that we could talk about. And I think maybe we should do this again sometime. I know when I was in school, particularly high school, history was just the most dreaded, boring subject. But of course, now I'm obsessed with it, and I realize it was because of the way it was being presented in schools. When was the War of 1812? Just dates and names and, things like that you just had to memorize.
I think the 1812 one, there was Brits burning the White House, something like that.
Yeah.
Having a free meal there.
Exactly. But it seems to me like the way to really learn about history is to find out information about individual people and what happened to them in their lives. Unfortunately for, a lot of the people in our backgrounds, there's not that much because they weren't that high in station. But I think that's the main thing, that it's fun when you find someone who was sort of known in history, because you can actually get information about that person. And but I still have that real aversion to that whole bloodline thing of, divine right and all that kind of stuff. That makes me cringe. I just don't think that should have a bearing on a person's station in life. Of course, I grew up in America, so what?
Well, that's it. I'm certainly behind you on that one. An accident at birth shouldn't really matter.
Exactly.
And the idea that in 2023 we've still got people who are crowned with, you're a direct communicate with God because you were sired through the loins of your mum and dad. It really, I struggle with that.
Yeah, especially today when we know so much about everyone. Through the media and communications are so improved today that we know too much sometimes. It feels like,
Well,
about people's personal lives. And now we know that, there's nothing special about those people.
I think that, today we believe a lot of what we're told. And one of the better things about history is where you do find an individual trying to understand, what was going on around you. This idea that, for example, I was discussing this just the other day. This idea that, peasants were fed and, there was food around here. And it's just untrue. If you go back to the 1700s and before, people died of starvation because there wasn't food. There's not mass crops, and we take that for granted today. So you need to, remove that, put yourself in the context, and you can better understand the way that people were. However, talking about an aversion to bloodlines and kings and queens, I want to introduce someone else, and this is William de Soulis, or his surname could be pronounced Souls, but it's Soulis. And this guy comes from I've visited here. This is just a stock image of a place called Hermitage Castle. This is on the border between England and Scotland in a place called Liddesdale. And I can genuinely say this is one of the creepiest places that I've ever visited. It's not just a very large entrance that's dominating.
Yeah, that's weird.
You get such a feel for a place. And I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about it. So it is supposedly built in 1240 by someone called Nicholas de Soulis. As I said, that's how you pronounce it. However, his descendant, who's someone called William de Soulis, well, he is someone who jumped. He's a direct ancestor of mine. He jumped out of my family tree because he was suspected of witchcraft and regicide. He was alleged that
Who was he trying to kill?
Robert I of Scotland.
Robert I. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's not just that. There's various myths about this character. In folklore, in the borders, so where you have what we called reaving territory. This is essentially the original cowboys. It's very difficult, harsh living, and people were stealing cows of each other. They started to fortify, and there were lots of arguments, and by arguments mean stabby time. But William de Soulis is accused of dabbling with the black arts and cursing the area. Walter Scott even writes about him, and essentially it is alleged that he summarily murdered children from the area. This is the border, Cumbria and
just for fun, or
yes, part of black arts and rituals.
Oh, I see.
And that the rumours surrounding his own death, after failing to kill the king, the locals allegedly boiled him alive.
Oh.
Now that
Gosh.
probably.
Now, what was his connection to Hermitage Castle? Was it his father built it?
His grandfather built it.
His grandfather built it.
And to be this dominating and very dark place. Now, it's almost certain that he didn't get boiled alive, and the witchcraft stuff is sort of attributed to him. But it also, this place attracted a few other people who we know of. Mary, Queen of Scots, for example. The castle, 200 years later, thereabouts, ends up in the hands of someone called the Earl of Bothwell. This is one of the Hepburns, James Hepburn. And essentially, Mary Queen of Scots ends up there. She visits Bothwell, and there's a bit of entrapment. There's all of this. So you've got these people.
But didn't she end up imprisoned there?
Essentially.
And for how long was that?
I'm not too certain. I mean, the story goes she was imprisoned there, or she rode there at night after Bothwell had been injured shortly after she'd given birth. Now, I think she was still married to Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, as he was. The original gunpowder plot occurred with him. He ends up dead, and Bothwell ends up marrying her. And yes, he did entrap her. She did flee to where she thought her cousin Elizabeth would assist her. And we know the story of Mary Queen of Scots. Unfortunately, that assistance ended up ultimately with her head rolling for no other reason really than
claim to the crown.
Claim to the throne and all of that. I mean, she did epitomise the union of England and Scotland in a strange way, because her son ends up the king of England and Scotland and Ireland and all of this. But I just wanted to say some very unusual characters there that I think have left a bit of a stain on the castle itself. You certainly feel a very oppressive feeling around that area. So if anyone is in the borders of Scotland, I would recommend going, and perhaps not at night time.
What's the nearest town or village?
It's a place called Newcastleton. If you're either in Carlisle or Dumfries, then it's around about 30 minutes away from there by car, or 20 on a good day. But it is a little bit of a drive into the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's such a recognizable structure. You can't forget about it once you know it. But that entrance, do you have any idea why they would have made such a big entrance? Is that part of the fortification, or? I've struggled with it defensively. I'm not too sure. Again, local folklore says the large gateway was for the giants that populated the area. Oh, well.
I think that's once they're in, where do they stay kind of thing. But, it's a lovely bit of folklore. Yeah,
it is. Well, we got a few minutes left. Have we got time to hit another one, or?
Yeah, very quickly. Someone called Hugh de Gifford, who's from a castle, again, not too far away. I thought I'd give him a little shout out for anyone who's wanting to have a look at someone who has a connection to the Knights Hospitaller. There is a place called Yester. It sort of means east, but Yester, Yester. There is allegedly a portal to hell that was constructed by this chap, Hugh de Gifford, and he was a magician and, confirmed necromancer. And I should say confirmed necromancer. He is in the Scotichronicon, the history of Scotland. It's a book. Is listed as the last practicing necromancer in Scotland. Now, I have no idea what on earth was going on in Scotland. People resurrecting the dead, killing God knows what, interfering with giants and all of this. But one of the key parts with Hugh de Gifford, or Hugo de Gifford as sometimes is, he was known as the Wizard of Yester, and a powerful warlock and necromancer, and he built deep into the ground, opening a portal to hell. It was apparent that through a pact with the devil, he could raise a magical army and use them to carry out his own will. And this was an army of hobgoblins.
And what can you give us a description of the hobgoblins?
I would absolutely love to. There's all sorts of different ideas around them. So from the Scots Chronicon, these are short, tough creatures, armored and all of this. There's others that suggest that they're quite tall but strong, fierce, evil, and all of this. What is interesting, though, I'm not suggesting that there's any truth in the pact with the devil or anything like that.
Or the hobgoblins, I would mean.
But what is interesting, and I was just reading about this not too long ago, actually, was that a walled-up room was found in the ruins of Yester Castle. And they essentially found a very, very deep chasm. Now, it's probably a well, but who knows? Could this, in fact, have been a very deep chasm down to hell? If I describe it, this is just from a quote from the 1800s. We spotted stairs descending into a cold, large, dark chamber. We thought that must be it, the vault, supposedly built by the same Hugo de Gifford, a man who left an ambiguous trace in our historical records. Yes, well, that's probably because of his, as it later goes on to say, for his demoniac or demoniac activities, or demonic is perhaps how we would say it. And some of the goblins have names, Bohol or Goblin Ha, and all of this. So very interesting stuff have been found. Lots of rumours of people being walled up by this. Again, odd character in history. What on earth is going on with necromancy? And all
Exactly. Well, it's pretty easy back then, especially, to just make an allegation like that, and people have no way of confirming it or denying it, because
well, things like this still happen to this day. There's lots of allegations that aren't true that are then publicized through various means, and I think if you want to
that's true,
demonize and discredit people, that's been part and parcel of history.
Yeah.
I suppose the difference being is when it comes to, we would take, we would go for a court case, we would do all of this. Back then, it really is around the court of superstition. This was an allegation that this is some sort of, it could be a portal to hell. No, this was a portal to hell. This was as real as trees are. It was just accepted. There we go.
Gosh. So lots of, but people couldn't look up the facts, is what I'm saying. Not that people do that today. Many people just accept what they're told, rather than digging in and trying to get to the heart of the matter. But surely then it was so much easier to perpetrate a hoax, to make a false allegation, any of that sort of thing. But some interesting characters, and there's so many more. I know we were going to get into Nostradamus, but and I was hoping also for Rasputin, but we'll have to cover them at another time. Maybe we'll do one on, fortune tellers or, mystics.
I think we can squeeze in.
We got 2 minutes.
Oh,
no. I'm so sorry.
I think we can
At
squeeze
the
in
wrong clock. No, go ahead. I'm so sorry. What a dunce I am.
Well, the two others that I thought I would bring up, one is, well, Rasputin, and if we get time, but one that I think certainly interests me is William de Nogaret, or Guillaume de Nogaret. And he was a, low-born.
On a show, or I guess we just went to the place.
Yeah, we went to where he was from. So he was from a place called Saint Felix, and a beautiful village, really exceptionally pretty place. But he was, low-born. Saint Felix Nogaret, I think, is what it was called. Nogaret sort of means walnut grower, so his name is William the Walnut Grower. He's not of high station, I should say, at the time. High birth, exactly, as they would say. And what's interesting about him is how he rises to essentially the top of the French government. And it's alleged that his grandparents were Cathars who were burned. And, there is perhaps some evidence that this was an accusation that was leveled against him frequently on his ruthless ascent to the top of the French government. Now, he is, he's around the early 14th century, the late 13th century, and it is my view, it is him and him alone who was responsible for the downfall of the Knights Templar.
Wow.
Which I'm currently writing about. He quite what his motivation was, I'm not too sure. But we know that he, whether he used the notion of his, and I should say alleged, grandparents' heresy, whether he was tired of hearing that and thought, well, the effective way to discredit someone is to call them a heretic. Perversely, he became a doctor in law at Montpellier. He gets a call from Paris to become a legal counsel to the king. So this is Philip IV, or Philip le Bel, as some people strangely call him. And it's really from there, with this very, I suppose, humble upbringing, that he orchestrated physically, I should say, attacks on a pope who was at Agnani in 1303, capturing that pope, bringing them to Avignon, creating the papal schism of the Avignon popes, and then began plotting a method of getting rid of the Templars. Now, a lot has been said around the demise of the Templars. I just wonder whether or not any of this is really due to, it's the Pope's private army, and the Pope ultimately was responsible for killing his grandparents, if indeed that was the case. And I should say Saint Felix certainly was a Cathar bastion, and we know that with them.
It's kind of a nebulous situation, with, or at least in my mind, with the Cathars and the Templars, because there's also been, opinions that they were sympathetic to the Cathars, but I don't see how that could have been. But what in your research, what have you found about? Is there any crossover, any connection between the Templars and the Cathars at all?
Yeah, lots. And as I say, currently writing my second book, which is essentially looking at this. So I have found a Templar commandery where two very prominent Cathars were buried, and they've come from various reports from inquisitors, etc. There seems to have been certainly in where you have Cathar families and a lot of Cathar beliefs. These are the Templars from the area. Remember, the Templars are not just the knights. You've also got all of the pages. You've got the retinue. We're related to local Cathars, and I'm not suggesting that this is a widespread tolerance of Cathars or anything like that, but there certainly seemed to be a degree of understanding between them. And de Nogaret's, the reason I say he is, for me, solely responsible, and this sort of blip in history, we don't see many commoners rising to the head of government, essentially, as Chancellor, as he would become, really for another couple of 100 years. There were some odd examples out there. What I did find in my research was in 1309, when Jacques de Molay was being questioned, and this is his, I think, third or fourth time that he's been questioned, the inquisitors themselves are interrupted by de Nogaret. So this idea that perhaps he didn't have too much involvement, well, he was clearly involved in the direct interrogation of some of these people. Now, the mystery, I suppose, for a lot of people will be, well, why did he do that? Was he after something? I think it's a little bit more, what's more apparent is he wanted the soul destruction of the Pope and perhaps even a Church of France to give more power either to him or the king, which, he was certainly controlling, or at least aiding in this way. And I don't think we'll get a chance to get on to Rasputin, but hey, maybe next time.
Maybe next time. Oh my goodness. We're at the very end. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you, James. I'm glad you're back, and hope you'll be around a lot more in the future, because we miss you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Good night.